It was late one October night in 1985, when I was driving home from work. I was about to pull into my driveway when my neighbor flagged me down. I got out of my car and he told me about the incident. All of the bodies in the cemetery were dug up. It was the largest cemetery in town and the bodies had completely disappeared. There had to be about 300 bodies in that cemetery, and I had thought my neighbor was insane when he told me. But I could tell it was true, just by the fear and confusion in his eyes. That night, I had drove to the cemetery to find out what happened myself. When I arrived, there were police swarming the area, and I was told to go home by one of the officers. I had relatives in that cemetery. One of them was my deceased wife, who had died last year in a freak accident. My half-brother was also buried there, along with my aunts and uncles, and even my grandparents. I had so many questions. How would someone be able to move all 300 of those bodies without someone noticing? How could they possibly dig up every single body, and who would be sick enough to do so? I assumed it must have been a group effort. I went home that night and went to bed. My mind was all over the place and was unable to rest. When I finally shut my eyes, there was a loud banging on the door. It was 6 a.m. I opened the door to see the officers who were going around asking everyone in town if they've seen or heard anything that night. They entered my house and began to ask questions. Where was I during the incident? Did I see anything suspicious while driving home, etc.? About 5 minutes later, they left, and they planned on searching on the other side of town. The cops were all over town. The county decided to prevent the case from entering the local news channel. From what I heard, they wanted to keep the case manageable and didn't want dozens of news reporters swarming the town. It's been about a week later, and I hadn't been able to sleep straight. The cops still haven't been able to find any trace. That day, I was driving to my father's house. My dad lived on the secluded side of town, and everywhere you looked it was all forest. It's a 40-minute drive to his house and all forest the entire way there. My dad lived alone with a few other small homesteads around him. When I arrived at my dad's house, he wasn't home. I had no idea where he could have been. He hardly ever left his house. It was on my drive back when I smelled something. I smelled something so horrid that I pulled over on the side of the road to vomit. The air smelled like there were 1,000 corpses surrounding me. I should have reported it to the police. I don't know why I didn't. I should have never investigated the smell by myself. It was getting late. It was around 4 p.m., and I decided to walk into the forest. I covered my nose with my shirt, but even then the smell still found a way into my nostrils. As I kept walking deeper into the dense forest, I saw an increasing amount of owls. There were owls everywhere. It felt like every tree branch had an owl perched on it. I then saw in the distance an abandoned house. The house was black and covered with ash. It looked to have burned down about a few decades ago and was covered in vines and brush. But the most unsettling feature was the amount of owls. All you could hear were owls all around you. Thousands were calling all around me, and I could barely hear myself think. I've briefly studied about birds in the past, and these owl calls clearly sounded distressed. It felt like they were warning me, trying to keep me away from that house, and that smell was 100% coming from that house. It was so bad I felt like I was going to pass out. The doorway was just a gaping hole, and my eyes began to water from the horrid smell. The walls and floors were entirely burnt and rotten. My ears began to ring from the owl noises. I followed the smell to the point where I puked even more all over myself this time. In the corner of one of the rooms I saw a doorway. The stairs led down. I began to walk down them, and at about halfway down the stairs, I could see severed human limbs. It was when I was on the final step when I could see the whole room. Piles of corpses, and there was a figure in the middle of the mess. In a fetal position, it was rocking back and forth, humming to itself. It was skinny. So skinny the spine was exposed. I literally mean the bone was sticking out of the thing. I turned around and made a run for it, my footsteps pounding on the stairs. I was about halfway to the top when I heard the thing sprinting up the stairs behind me. By the time I made it to the top of the stairs, The thing was inches behind me. I was about to make it out the front door when my foot fell through one of the floorboards. I then felt the talons claw into my stomach and drag me back down the basement stairs. I opened my eyes and I saw it. It looked just like an owl. The head, the eyes, the way it moved its neck. It slashed my throat with its talons, then threw me into the pile of corpses. I don't know how I'm still alive. I've lost a lot of blood. And worst of all, I don't know when that thing will come back. If anyone is reading this, I'm probably dead. I'm probably going to rot here with the rest of the 300 dead bodies. This year has been though for me and my family. Not only have we moved from one country to another, but in the span of 3 years, we have had to go through 4 moves. The first one in search of a better life, the second due to lack of money, the third to get closer to my mother's family, and the last because the tenants sold the house with us still living in it. And now you may wonder, why the hell am I telling you this? What does it have to do with the title of the story? Did I eat a clickbait? I beg you, reader, please read my story until the end. As bad as it sounds, men like my neighbor are everywhere, and it is more than necessary not to ignore situations like this. The moving is just a bit of context to introduce you to my mental health problems. I won't give you too many details, but so many movings and changes have taken their toll on my head. I went through a very low patch, suffering from suicidal thoughts and anxiety attacks. Several times this has culminated in me running away from home, and once they even called the police. My parents' fear that something would happen to me forced them not only to obviously seek professional help, but also to be with me at all times. I never slept alone, was never home alone, always had the bathroom door ajar, and under no circumstances could I ever go outside without their supervision. It's not that I had that many friends back then, so this past measure never bothered me much. Months passed, and my mental health, therefore my physical health as well, improved infinitely. Little by little the supervision over me was lowering and my social skills were curiously flourishing. Everything was going incredibly great. Too good to be true. I wish I wasn't right. A couple of weeks ago, a couple of policemen knocked on my door to talk to my mother. And no, it wasn't for me this time. They were looking for a guy who supposedly lived in our neighborhood. I never saw the picture, but according to my mom's description, he was a sleazy, bald, old guy with a perverted, demonic look. Needless to say, we were scared to death. One thing that is important to keep in mind is that I am not an only child. In fact, I have many siblings, of which only 3 live with me, all sisters. My mother had a talk with us about being extra careful. She also increased supervision over me again. The police hanged around for a couple of days, shutting the operation when no evidence was found. They'll never know the pain I would have saved if they have looked for a little longer. Weeks went by, and little by little, we forgot about it and everything went back to normal, as if those policemen had never knocked on our door and nor my mother had never seen that picture. The paranoia of feeling that man's eyes every moment was dissipating as the time went by. Only when fooling around with my friends I was reminded of that episode. I thought we were completely safe. Safe until exactly 1 year from now. Like almost every day, I went to do my exercise routine in the pool, unaware that my life would make a 180 loop in just a few hours. I swam a bit here and there. Some older gentleman, probably English, approached to the pool and I knew it was time to go. It was cold anyway, and I don't being surrounded by strange men on my own. I dried my hair, put on a towel and headed home. It wasn't very far away from the public pool, just a 5-minute walk. If it wasn't for the lady who asked me for help on the way, I could have maybe make it in too. She was probably in her late 50s, slim figure, gray hair and dark circles around her eyes. You could tell the poor woman was very tired, almost dead in life. With a surprisingly sweet voice, she asked me if I could help her with the supermarket bags. I couldn't refuse. To thank me for my job, she invited me over to her house for tea. I don't know if it was out of pity or politeness, but I ended up accepted to have tea with her. I can't recall why though. It is not something I do often, and oh my god how much I regret it. She offered me cookies and tea before we started chatting. She was not only kind, but incredibly smart. She had studied plastic surgery at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. She had been married for 35 years and was mother 3 wonderful children, the youngest being my age. When I started to get dark, I politely said goodbye. She got up and approached to me. Suddenly, with her thin arms, she hugged me tightly, very tightly, too tightly. In a few seconds, everything went pitch black around me. From that moment everything is confusing and blurry. I had no clue of what happened or how much time had passed. I was disoriented, thirsty and hungry. There was no light, all silent and humidity was unbearable. I really couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. It would have been an hour or 2 before I heard a noise. I don't really know. I lost track of time as soon as I opened my eyes. Footsteps on the wood could be heard, slowly and cautiously getting closer and closer. The door opened, a black silhouette could be seen moving towards my. It was her, definitely her. More tired and skinnier than I remember, but her with no doubt. I bet she had been crying. I tried to stand up, but my legs and arms were entirely numb. I swear that I could move them, unless a few moments ago. The woman came up to me, with her bony figure and tires stand. I've just realized that, despite knowing so much about her life, I didn't know something so basic as her name. Pretty sure everything she told me was a lie. She walked towards me, trembling and cautiously, like when you're walking by a stray dog. I might have bitten her if I had the chance though. He knelt down, few feet from me of course. It took me off guard, but when she saw my face she started crying uncontrollably. "Where am I?" I exclaimed, more scared than I was before. "What's going on? Who are you? What am I doing here? Please don't hurt me. Think of your son." She ignored me and started crying even harder if it was even possible, her body trembling with each sob. "Don't dare to come out," I heard her say, still sobbing. "Please don't ask for help. Don't make any noise, I beg you, or he will kill us both." I wasn't understanding anything. I asked and implored, but she only wailed. Her fear was contagious, and I began crying too. I knew that, whatever the situation was, it was serious and bad, really bad. I tried to keep these thoughts away, but something told me I would no longer see my parents nor my siblings. I would no longer see my friends. I would no longer be anyone. My life was over. Everything was over. All I had left was to mourn for what I would have been if that crying lady never brought me here. We stayed like that, crying in silence for a while. Suddenly her murmurs, almost imperceptible, ceased. She stared at me. For seconds, that seemed like hours. "Stay silent and maybe we'll make it alive." She got up as if nothing had happened and left. I was left into pure darkness. I didn't know it at the time, but it would be the last time I would see light. I don't know how I didn't go crazy. Maybe it was the routine or something in that woman's words that gave me hope. She said I could live. I hoped that she wasn't lying. Now I could only obey her. My days were filled with plans and fantasies of escaping. Thankfully I now could move my hands, but still not my feet. Every time I fell asleep, a tray of what I think was food would appear in my lap. I never knew what I ate or drank. Curiosity and hunger always overcame caution. I never ate enough. The plates were small and I never got used to the pain of visceral hunger nor the cold food. It always seemed off to me that I never smelled bad. With that dampness and lack of cleanliness, I should have been completely rotten by then. I tried not thinking much about it though. Having a stranger washing me every day is not a very pleasant thing to imagine. Since the day when we burst into tears, I swore to myself that I would escape, no matter what. Someday I would know the truth, and someday, perhaps not too far away, I would see my family and the light of day once again. However, I keep wondering who is that man the lady mentioned before, the one who wants to harm us, whose voice I might hear every day without fail. I don't think he knows about me yet. I even think that woman is protecting me, hiding me. She seemed frightened to death when I last saw her. I must escape, quickly. Something's telling me that the worst fate I can face is him finding out about my existence. I don't allow myself to buy a doormat for my home anymore. I lived in an apartment complex about 5 years ago right in the heart of New York City. I was living alone at the time. My family was in Rhode Island, and with me being new to the area, I didn't have many friends to speak of. I moved into Shallow Reed with my backpack and 2 large suitcases. Boxes from home were on the way, but it couldn't be anything too big to not fit in the mail and had to be light enough for me to not go dirt poor in fees. My family helped, but they've already done enough. I was fresh out of college and looking to be an editor. This lifestyle didn't come with the highest hope, just an immature energy that will push your loved ones away from you but will fulfill your personal aspirations. My apartment was small but fulfilled more than enough. The rooms were clean and the utilities worked. I was stressed but happy, excited even. The area was, well, pretty rough. I had to grow a pretty thick skin to not take it personally if someone was calling me something or trying to hassle me. Crossing the street was once stressful, but it's nothing now. The bus station was only down the street and it took me everywhere I needed to go. I didn't take my car with me, so walking and public transport was my way to go. It was about 2 years into my job at a publishing house that I had to leave. I had recently gotten a few shelves, a few wall decorations, and a welcome mat for the entrance to my apartment. It was a tufted mat with a rainbow, and under it was a white lettering of welcome, something sweet, subtle queer pride. You know, a homey feel. The day of the incident went about as expected. I woke up for work, did what I had to do, and came home. I didn't go out to a club or a bar that night. I liked the nightlife of the city. I had a few people over every now and again, but no one really stuck around. I had a relatively defensive disposition with where I lived. There were a few times that I had to fend off solicitors. I always kept my door locked and bolted. I didn't take any risks, especially when I lived on the first floor. I was pretty pissed off that night, to be honest. The unit above me was blasting music, and the couple in the room next to me was enjoying their relationship just a bit too loudly. It was a little after 8 p.m. and I was watching something on my TV. I didn't really watch a lot of TV shows. I read what I needed from my phone and heard office gossip at work. I did watch the nightly news though, got into that habit from my parents. I had to be in the know about literary news, not so much local news. Suddenly, I heard the faintest sound of a knock. I perked up from my seat on my couch, but didn't mute the show I was watching. It could have just been anything. There was a knock again, this time sounding more firm, more confident. Immediately I stood, some panic starting to rush through me. Who would be knocking on my door at this hour? The police. Maybe a neighbor. I walked over to my door quietly, sneaking up to look through the peephole. The person was looking down at the floor and had a red jacket on with the hood obscuring their face. They looked small though, like a child. They nervously shuffled as they waited for me to respond. I cleared my throat and put on my man voice trying to sound somewhat intimidating. They were knocking at my door after all. Hello, who's there? The person turned to look at the door. I could see the tears running down the young girl's face. I barely even gave it a second thought as I opened the door. With her being what? No more than 9, I was concerned for her rather than myself. Hi, little one. UHHH. Are you looking for someone? Is someone out with you? I can't find my mom. She sniffled and wiped her eyes. She was wearing a simple red raincoat that was soaked from the rain outside. I peeked down each end of the hall and saw no one else there. I knelt to be closer to her height. I'm not a big guy, but I towered over her. When did you last see her? She was here, but then she was gone. She continued to talk, but her words came out as a blubbering mess. "It's all right. Listen, we will find her. Do you know a phone number we can call?" She nodded and wiped her face once more. "Come inside and we will get you dried off." I gently offered her my hand, which she took after a moment. There was no such thing as a front office to shallow read, and at this time of day, I doubted any of the landlords were here. She wiped her shoes on my doormat, and when she looked up her eyes were wide, scanning around the apartment. Not that I felt embarrassed at the time, but my house wasn't really geared toward young children. I had a nice little cart of different alcohols and various collections strewn about that I used for decoration. I led her to the living room where the TV was. She took off her raincoat after I asked if I could leave it on the doorknob outside the apartment. Anyone who knew her would recognize it, and I doubted anyone in my building would steal a children's raincoat. I quickly rushed to my bathroom to grab her a towel. She was standing in the center of the living room staring at the TV. I offered her the towel and grabbed my phone. "Here you are. I'm Derek. Can I get your name?" "I'm Cho. I'm calling Mom," she said in her small voice. I offered her my phone, which she quickly snatched up, dialing the numbers. She turned her back to me as the dial tone rang. I stepped away to the kitchen to give her a moment. A small marble island separated the two rooms, which allowed me to peek over at her while I got her a cup of water. After a few moments, she spoke in a different language, which I only knew enough about to know it was some Asian language. She turned to me as I handed her the water. "What is this place?" she asked. "Shallow Reed Apartments. I'm Unit 5, first floor," I clarified. She spoke again to the person on the phone. She was quiet for a moment, looking around the room as if someone could be listening to her. She briefly made eye contact with me and flicked her gaze away. I felt a bit awkward standing there, despite knowing the fact that this little girl could do absolutely nothing to harm me. I was still a bit on edge. It was a few moments later before Cho handed me my phone back. "She'd be here soon," was all she said to me, looking down at the floor. I looked at my phone, thinking if I should report this to the police or not. Yeah, her mother is on the way. But why was she missing in the first place? "How come you knocked on my door and not Unit 1? "Sorry, the first door in the hall. Your carpet." "My carpet," I thought. What did she mean by that? "There's a rainbow." "No one else had a rainbow," she said simply, like it was obvious. I realized then she was talking about my doormat. Shallow Reeds wasn't exactly the most queer-inclusive, but I didn't worry about someone knocking down my door for having a rainbow on my mat. I hoped to show a bit of friendliness. Didn't expect it would lead a kid to my door. I moved on and asked another question. "How did you and your mom get separated?" I asked her in the most peaceful tone I could. She didn't answer. She just kept staring at the ground. Her eyes darted to my TV when the opening theme for the news started playing. "Can you change this, please?" she asked. I mean, it felt out of the blue that she asked me that. But then again, I don't think the news is the most popular children's show. I found the remote right where I left it on the arm of the couch and put on a kids' show starring a blue healer family. Figured that would be better than the nightly news. She didn't really seem open to talking much anyway. Well, the quicker she's out of here, the better, I thought. It was maybe 5 minutes later that a hurried knock sounded through the apartment. I immediately stood up from where I was on the opposite end of the couch from Cho and rushed to the door. I instantly opened it up and found a woman clutching the red raincoat in her hands. Unlike Cho, she had long black hair and a slight hunch on her back. She looked younger than what I expected to be, walking with a hunch. She was maybe in her 30s to 40s. Cho cried behind me, "Mama." I quickly stepped to the side as the woman moved past me and into my home. I kept the door open, expecting them to be on their way shortly. The mother started talking to Cho in the same language I heard over the phone. She cupped her face in her hands and did a thorough look over of her child. She arrived maybe 10 minutes ago. She hasn't said much. I spoke up, but the mom didn't indicate if she heard me or not. "Would you mind if we use your restroom? She has a cut on her arm that I want to clean," said the mom. "Oh, sure. It's down the hall and to the left." First aid kit is in the closet. I pointed in the direction she had to go. My bedroom was right across from it. She led her daughter to the bathroom, looking a bit too curiously into my bedroom for my liking. They've seen the whole apartment by this point. I didn't remember seeing a scratch on the kid, but I didn't search her, to begin with. While they were in the bathroom, I went to change the TV but couldn't find the remote. I found that a bit odd, seeing as I placed it in the same spot I did earlier. The great thing about today's day and age is that everything is digital. So, I pulled up the TV app on my phone and changed it from there. When I changed the channel back to the news, I was met with a video of a roaring house fire that happened earlier in the day. Well, I didn't miss all of the nightly news coverage. I could hear them fiercely whispering in the bathroom, which I didn't find surprising. I'm sure the mom was giving the kid an earful, but I was under the impression that improper adult supervision was the cause and not the child. But I'm not gonna intervene. And in our last update of the night, we have a local alert brought to you by the police department. We are on the lookout for a group of individuals wanted for home invasion and homicide. On the screen, they flashed a few images of men that all looked like basic figures. None of them really stood out in any remarkable way. They all wore black masks and all had thin figures. They've been breaking into homes and stealing electronics, jewelry, and anything that could be sold off easily. It was what came next that caused my stomach to churn. In their most recent attack, the homeowners had a camera system installed that captured the entire event all on film. On the TV screen, someone was standing in a bright red raincoat. The recording had audio and subtitles to go along with it. I can't find my mom. I could feel the blood draining from my face. I quickly lowered the TV volume, looking behind me to make sure no one was there. The bathroom light was still on, but the whispering had stopped. I turned back to the screen and they had fast-forwarded the clip. The same woman in my bathroom was there on my screen. I quickly dialed 911 and turned off the TV. I kept my eyes locked on the bathroom as I rushed to the front door. When I was about to reach for the handle, a heavy knock banged against the door. I froze in place, my finger hovering over the call button. From the bathroom, I heard the lady call, "That should be my brother. He's our ride home. Can you tell him we will be right out?" "Sure thing. Let me just turn off the oven," I responded. Panic coursed through me. I slowly locked the door. I even grabbed some mail to make an impromptu door stop. As I shoved it underneath the door, the person knocked again. I jumped back and tiptoed to my bedroom. They pounded the door again. I held my breath as I passed the bathroom. Neither the girl nor the woman made a sound. I locked my door behind me and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? My house is being broken into. It's the people from. I was interrupted by a sudden slamming. They were breaking down the front door. They made it into my home, I whispered. I stepped away from my door. Sir, what is your location? There were shouts from the men who busted the door down. They were smashing my stuff and God knows what else. I knew my door wouldn't hold long enough for the police to get here. I had to do something now. Without a second thought, I ran to the one window in my room. I heard the woman cry. My doorknob twisted as she did. She was crying for help. She yelled that they would kill her if I didn't help. They would kill her child. I opened the window and pushed the screen out of the frame. The walls shook as someone started to pound my bedroom door. I stepped out of the frame, only to have a hand grab tightly onto my shirt collar. Someone was standing outside waiting. I dropped my phone as I was pushed to the ground. I could hear the 911 operator through the phone as it dropped, breaking against the small rocks that lined my building. There were hands around my throat before I could even react. The person on top of me dropped all his weight onto my hips, straddling me and keeping me pinned. I struggled in his grip. I didn't even have time to panic. All I could do was react. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, the utter disregard for humanity. I can still see the smile stretched across his lips. I could see myself reflected in the black of his eyes. I tried to knock away his arms, trying to scratch at his face. My head was pounding, and my vision getting darker and darker. I couldn't hear him, but I could see him bending closer to my face. Spit hit my cheeks as he laughed just inches from me. I grabbed the ground under me and used the last of my strength to aim for those dark pools. The blood hit my cheek before his laughter turned into screaming. Air rushed into my lungs as the man clutched his eye, or what would be left of it. I could only wiggle away from him as he dislodged a small rock from his eye socket. He pulled out more than the rock. I finally picked myself up and left the man behind me. I ran. I ran as fast as I possibly could and didn't look back. I ran across the street and started yelling at the top of my lungs for help. There were a few businesses, one of which was a pizza joint that still had its lights on. I ran to their door and yanked it open. I quickly found the lock for the glass door and turned it. The employees immediately started yelling at me, getting ready to defend themselves, I'm sure. I turned to face them, and they stopped trying to shoo me away after they saw the dark red handprints around my neck. Everything was a blur of movement from that point on. The pizza place ended up calling the cops, which is where I was able to give them more information. The cop cars took a few minutes to arrive. Long enough for me to know that if I didn't go out my window, by the time they arrived, there wasn't anyone left in my apartment. Even with the officers by my side, I was worried about going in. They had a team come in to try and get samples of anything you could think of. They swabbed the man's blood that got on me and took photos of everything. My apartment was an utter disaster. Whatever they couldn't take, they smashed. The police took me down to the station in order for me to write up a formal report. I told them about Cho and the woman who came to my door. Hours later, they gave me an update. They found a man fitting the description I gave them. He was missing his eye and was dumped in a garbage bin 20 minutes from where I lived. Even after I spent a week in a hotel and another week at a co-worker's place, there was no sign of the people who attacked me. The cops weren't any help either. Without anything to go off of, all they could do was wait. I asked the cops why they came after me, and they responded by asking me if I owned any firearms, which they would have known the answer to already. But I told them I didn't. They told me how the other homes they had been suspected of breaking into all had something in common. The first family they attacked worked closely with a local church. Another home was just an apartment of college students. And the last home, the one that got footage of the woman from their security cameras, was a family who didn't have their citizenship in the States yet. It didn't take much to connect the dots that none of these people would have owned any guns or would have turned away a young child. We were all targeted as an easy mark. The police said they couldn't know how much the group knew about us until they were able to catch the culprits, but they knew enough about me. I've since moved and taken some self-defense courses, and even bought myself a handgun that I touch once a year to bring to the range. I jump every time I hear a knock at the door, but I'll be ready for when they come to visit me again. At least that's how I felt before I came home today. And on my doorknob, there was a red raincoat.